All right, we have a very special treat for our speaker tonight. Richard Mullally has interviewed over 1,000 Muskegon County World War II veterans and many thousands of family members of those who have passed on. The number of tribute photos he has made freely as a public service owned by this museum is approaching 8,000. Tonight, we will be seeing about 50 of these photos and to hear part of their story as they served our nation when we needed their help most. As you see and hear this talk about local people, consider your family's own deceased World War II veteran. Is that man or woman already included in this tribute for their great-grandchildren to see? You have Richard's card. Give him a call. If you have a photo which can be copied, only you can see that this is done. Now please give a big round of applause for Richard Mullally.
Thank you, Wes. This is so special. And I have to say it's really special because I'm wearing one of these chokers for the first time in years. I had to go online to get the directions on how to do this, and several people gave me compliments. But Mom, do you see it? She loves that. Well, I've said to one friend here that the next time you see me this way, I'll be in my casket. He said, no, I'll beat you there. Okay. I would like, for a moment, all the World War II veterans to stand. They did it for us. We're so glad so many of you could make it here tonight. I'll try to tell the stories of a few of them. There are 8,000 in the museum, in the computer, or in the actual display. I'm going to talk about 50 of them. That means I had to go through 160 and just pick out one. So if I didn't include some of you, I at least had your picture on display for 5 seconds. And several of you saw that. I'm dedicating this talk tonight to 3 people. And I'd like you to just look at the card for a moment. You have it, or maybe you're sitting on it. See that lady? Shirley Peters. I met her about 8 years ago, and that was her a number of times through the years. The reason I'm talking about this Navy wave, we did stenographer work during the war, is that I was going to deliver this flyer to her so that she could be here while she can't be here. You have the Sunday Chronicle, you'll see her obituary. She was 95. When I went over to Seminole Shores, I had a stack of flyers, and somebody took me aside and said, well, Shirley's not here anymore, she's gone. So I'm dedicating the talk to her, and also to my friend Dwayne Quake. How many of you ever heard of him? One of the nicest guys around town. In fact, we were talking a couple months ago. I told him about this talk, and he said, I'll be there. I'll ask my neighbor to bring me over. Well, he can't be here either, but I'm dedicating the whole talk to him. Because 2 months ago, we lost him. He died instantly. A shoplifter driving a stolen car was running away from the police. And Dwayne turned into his path. That was the end. a really nice fellow. I would always tell him when I'd meet him or talk to him on the phone, "You're the only Q in this whole program." And we had such nice times together talking about the old days. In fact, he apologized for the quality of his picture. It looks okay to me, it's a little grainy, but he said, "You know what, General Patton kept us really busy over there. We didn't have time for cameras, so we're lucky to have even this." Why do I tell people that we had 20,000 veterans from Muskegon County? Only found 8,000 so far, but I'm only scratching the surface. And it's pictures like this that explain it. This is from the Chronicle from 1944, when they needed a lot of replacements because what had been going on over in Europe and in the Pacific. On March 25th, they loaded up 10 Greyhound buses full of new recruits to go to Detroit for the physical. 2 days later, they loaded up the same buses again with, I don't know how many, but you can imagine how many it was. In 3 days, all those people were entering the military. And 8,000 is just scratching the surface. How many of you have ever heard of John Lappo? Lappo Lumber Company, Fruitport. He is world famous, but not for a regular thing. He was decorated for World War II. He was a pilot, and he stayed in the military after that. In 1959, he was flying his B-47 Stratojet, which was the fastest bomber in the entire world at that time. And he said to his crew, as they were returning to their Upper Peninsula base, "How would you like to fly underneath the new Mackinac Bridge?" It was only a year old. And nobody said no. The crew agreed. Sounds like fun. And we're going to get away with it too because nobody will know it's us. His daughters, he's been gone a long time, his daughters said, "Go ahead and tell Dad's story because everybody in the world knows about it anyway. They might as well hear the facts." He was 39 years old. Wouldn't you think that he would be a little too old for pulling a stunt like that? No. He said he always wanted to do it, and he wanted to go underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. This was handier, so he did. One person snitched. There were probably hundreds of people driving on the bridge that day who saw it, but nobody knew who he was. But the crew member did. So you've heard of a court martial. That was the next step. He was in the Air Force at the time, and of course there was testimony. Friends and relatives would come in, and one man said, "You should have given him a medal." The Air Force judges were not amused. He flew a desk for the rest of his time. Fortunately, they allowed him to stay in the military until 1972 when he retired. But that was the end of his flying. Now you know the story. This is a publication that was put out in relationship to the Muskegon Chronicle, a World War II Chronicle. How many of you have this? Well, several pages in here focus on the men who didn't come home. I say men because no Muskegon woman was killed in World War II. One lady did walk into an aircraft propeller face first, but she made it. She was able to live, even with her injuries. But all the other people who died were men, and they're listed in here. It started in 1945 in September. The Chronicle did an entire page of the men who died from Muskegon. It was full of errors and omissions, but at least they had the list out. 50 years later, the exact same list with the mistakes and with the omissions was published. In 2009, years after this, Chronicle published the exact same list again with the omissions and the mistakes. I sent the Chronicle a letter, I don't know if it even got to them, but I said, please do not publish that list again. Because we now have pictures of just about all of them. We have full information on just about every one of them. And it would be an embarrassment if we used the old information from 1945 to publish. For example, 38 of these men are listed this way. No information available. What they should say is, nobody bothered to check. There he is. There is information available, and a wonderful picture too. But it takes digging. Every man from Muskegon who was killed in the war, there's an article in the Muskegon Chronicle about him. Those Muskegon Chronicle articles are on microfilm in 2 different libraries. All it takes is for somebody to look it up. And then we don't have to always say on Memorial Day, we'll never forget the men who died to make us free. We don't know their names, of course. We don't know what they look like or anything about them. But now we do. If you go to the LST Museum, you will see almost every one of them. And some of them will be outstanding pictures like this. Okay, is there anybody from Joe's? Yes, there's somebody from Joe's family here. I'll tell you the background. This man was in Special Services Company, which means he wasn't there on the front lines. He was working with the USO and the entertainers. He had many different jobs. One of them would be to run the projectors and make sure the movies are delivered from one area to another so the men could see the latest Hollywood movies. And that meant such a lot to them. He also transported people from one area to another, the USO entertainers. The highlight of his life, Dinah Shore. He had the job of taking her in his Jeep from one base to another so she could put on another show. Well, you remember Dinah Shore, don't you? Well, he did too. These places were sometimes near the battle area, and he was driving Dinah Shore to the next base, and he knew that an artillery shell was headed in his direction. He screeched to a stop, pushed her into the ditch, the muddy ditch, face down, and jumped on her to protect her. And he told his family years later, I never knew a woman could swear like that. When I first called Joe on the phone, his brother told me the phone number. I called him. He was in his later years, of course, and he said to me, oh, I'm too old for this. Why don't you just leave me out of it? And he was polite, but insistent that he did not want to be included in the pictures of the veterans. So I talked with his daughter and son-in-law. They gave me the picture that you saw just a moment ago. They gave me the discharge papers, so I had this complete record. And I thought, well, I didn't meet the old guy, but he's in the museum. One day I was driving through McDonald's, and I saw one older man all by himself. There was nobody else in the place. He was having his breakfast. So I walked in and I said, excuse me, like I've said hundreds of times, are you a World War II veteran? Well, yes. Could you tell me your name? He said, Joe Bates. So I got the album out, and there he is. He's looking at his own picture. And I said, do you remember when I called you a couple of years ago? He was very surprised. And of course, his family was very happy that great-grandchildren will be able to know about him. You may remember Ackerhoff mortuary, Roland Ackerhoff. The interesting thing about him, being a Marine, he was wounded on Iwo Jima. I met him a number of times in his later years. And he told me, and other people told me too, that he had to wait for a long time before he could get with his group and go into the battle area because he didn't have any boots. There wasn't a size that would fit him. So he waited, and eventually they gave him the correct size, and then he went over into the Pacific. Oh, I remember her so well. She taught me more about nursing than I'd ever heard. She's a beautiful young lady. I met her when she was in her 90s, and she told me the information here, but she also told me that she worked as a nurse. And she said it was pretty upsetting at first, but she was trained to never cry in front of a soldier, even though your heart was breaking. She was told to go to your apartment after work, then you cry. You don't cry in front of the wounded man. And you also do not let him know that he's dying, but you stick with him and hold his hand. And she said, I did that. I did it proudly. And she would ask him questions about his mom and dad and his family, knowing that he would be dead in just a short time, so that he did not die alone. All the nurses got training with that. This is a Navy veteran I met. He's no longer with us, but he was there on D-Day at Omaha Beach, and he was aboard his ship. Now, his duty, he told me, was to gather the bodies that were brought back from shore and loaded onto the ship, and also the wounded men. And he'd separate them into groups, and then they'd go back to England, make another trip and come over. I saw something in his apartment that should be one of the most iconic pictures in World War II. This was taken about 5 o'clock from his ship as he's looking toward Omaha Beach. And he has no idea what he's going to be doing or seeing. But that picture was proudly enlarged and put on his wall by his family. Here's another one with no information available. Well, there is information available. And there are wonderful pictures if you can just get with the right people. And then tell them we never need the originals, we just need the copy pictures. So all his information is there, including how he passed away, and he's buried over in Italy. No questions, please.
Can you use the name? Sometimes we can't see.
The name doesn't matter. These names are not important at all. And I'd rather not have any questions because I need to get through this and talk about each picture for maybe a minute, or maybe a minute and a half. So, and also, if I refer to certain people in the audience, let's save our applause. Otherwise, we'll be here till sundown. Al Flickham. Where is Mrs. Flickham? Okay, right here. Good. I met Al and his wife when I was working at Ackley Hospital. I saw this older gentleman walking down the hall, and I interrupted him and said, excuse me, are you a World War II veteran? I'll never forget his words. June 6, 1944, Omaha Beach. I knew I had a hot one on my hands there. So I've met with Al so many times and got into politics a little too often. He's gone now, and his widow is not looking for a replacement because she had the best. And she said he knew that he had the best too. Did I get that right? Okay, this is more or less an anonymous person, but it shows you that we use pictures from the newspaper when there is no other picture available. I'm using him as an example because the article only said a couple things about it. But Ancestry.com has outstanding Navy records. So you can take a grainy photograph of this person and you can find out he was on all kinds of ships. At first I thought he must have gotten in trouble, transferred from one ship to another. No, he had special radio man training. He knew more than anybody on the ship how to set up the system and work it. And then they would transfer him to the next ship and the next and the next. That's why sometimes people served on many different ships. At first I thought it was a little inefficient, but no, the Navy knew what they were doing. No, he's not one of our veterans. Well, Don Knotts was a World War II veteran, but I'm using him as an example of an anonymous person. See, I'm not going to mention everybody's name. There was, well, I may shock you by saying this, but some World War II veterans were known to take a drink once in a while. Yes? Well, this particular veteran, who was nameless, was really well known for that. And in fact, he had a business somewhere in West Michigan. I won't narrow it down at all. But he ran a business, and he was breaking in a new guy, showing him the ropes. What do you do here and how you do this? And he said, now if you really have trouble and somebody breaks in or wants to hold you up, pull a .38 revolver out from underneath. You might know why I've got Barney up there. He pulled it out and he said, now, this is what you use, but be careful, it has an air trigger. Pow! He lost a bunch of his important wines. Well, I think